Hey there, beautiful people. How are you? I'm going to be talking all about herbal tinctures. I'm going to be talking all about the most common questions that I get asked. Essentially, we're going to be talking about what are herbal tinctures. And I'm going to compare an alcohol tincture to a glycerin tincture. And I'm going to share some other alternatives to alcohol as an extractor, as a solvent for herbal tinctures. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to store your tinctures, how to dose your tinctures, and a lot more. So stick around. And remember, this is a live video. So I'm in front of the camera, Heaven's behind the camera, and I encourage you to push like and talk and subscribe and put your comments in. As I go through the video, I'm going to be asking you some questions, so go ahead and comment. Just know that I'm not going to stop talking immediately to answer your questions right away, but Heaven can help you with that. And if this is our first time meeting, I want to introduce myself. My name is Maria Chaudhry. I'm a midwife and an herbalist. And as a midwife, I've attended hundreds of births and safe home births. And as an herbalist, I've developed a beautiful herb company. We make tons of tinctures and we sell them all over the world. You can learn more about us at birthsongbotanicals.com. Okay, so let's get started and start talking about what are herbal tinctures. So essentially, the word tincture is a definition in and of itself. So an herbal tincture is an herb. It can be fresh or dried. It can be one herb or it can be multiple herbs put together. You can utilize the roots, the bark, the stems, the leaves, the flowers, the berries. All parts of the plants can be tinctured. And a tincture means you put the plant part in a mixture of alcohol and water. The alcohol and water becomes a solvent. That solvent is called a menstruum. Alcohol and water, that solvent, extracts the medicinal properties from the plants. So a tincture is a liquid herbal extraction made from alcohol. So when you're making a tincture, you're going to put your herbs into a jar, essentially, and you're going to put your menstruum, the alcohol and water, and you're going to shake it up and you're going to let it macerate. You're going to let it sit for about 4 to 6 weeks. You shake it continuously every day. After 4 to 6 weeks, you're going to press out the herbs, which is now called the marc. You're going to press those herbs out and you're going to compost those herbs. You're going to filter out the liquid and you have a concentrated liquid. That's a tincture. Then you're going to put the liquid in a dark container, put a lid on it, seal it, and label it and date it. And you're going to store it in a dark room. I made a whole video about that. You can watch that video. It'll be linked in the description below. Now, there are other herbal extractions and other things that they call tinctures. So it's a little bit confusing. People are like, well, they're pointing to other items and they're calling those tinctures too. So other solvents that you can use to extract medicinal properties from the herbs, you could use glycerin, you could use vinegar, right? Those are sometimes called tinctures as well, right? But technically, an extraction made out of glycerin is a glycerite, and an extraction made out of vinegar is a vinegar. And then just as a side note, other things you can use to extract medicinal properties out of plants, you could use water, that's what tea is, or an infusion or a decoction or a compress. You could utilize oil, olive oil, and make a salve or a cream or a lotion. You could utilize honey, and that makes an oxymol, and those are wonderful and delicious. So there's lots of solvents that extract medicinal properties. A tincture is an herbal remedy made from alcohol. So glycerins are glycerites, they're extracted from glycerin. So let's talk a little bit about glycerin. Glycerin is this odorless, colorless, super super sweet, very thick, like the consistency of syrup, that's mixed with a little water to extract the medicinal properties. Glycerin is a good extractor, right? However, when you compare it to an alcohol tincture or an alcohol solvent and a glycerin solvent, there are some pros and cons and benefits between the two of them. So a glycerin is great at extracting the aromatic or the volatile oils of a plant. So think of it like a really delicious smelling plant like lavender, or even not so delicious smelling, the root, but valerian is a strong smelling plant, or peppermint or fennel. Those have volatile oils, those have flavors. Licorice, anise. The glycerin is really good at extracting flavors out of the plants. And glycerins are super sweet. So in and of themselves, that medicine, that herbal medicine that you're going to make of an alcohol medicine or a glycerin medicine, the glycerin medicine is going to taste better because it's sweeter and because it extracts the flavor. And glycerin is really good at extracting the medicinal properties from like the soft parts or the aerial parts of plants. So think of the leaves and the flowers and the stems, or fresh fruits and berries. However, an alcohol is a much stronger solvent, and it can extract the like parts of the chemical parts of the plants that's hard, that doesn't lend themselves really easily to water, that you kind of have to like get at. So you think about it, you have to like get at a root. Just in general, you got to dig a root out, right? So it's the same thing. If you're going to get the medicine out of a root, you kind of got to like go deep and like get it. So alcohol is going to get that. It's going to get it from the bark, from the dried seeds that are really encapsulated and closed, and they really don't want to open up. So you have to have something stronger to penetrate in. So alcohol is going to be better for that. And alcohol is a much stronger, longer lasting preservative. So when you make an alcohol tincture, it's going to get the deeper, stronger components of a plant, and it's going to make a more concentrated liquid, and that alcohol is going to preserve it for a much longer amount of time. And the alcohol is going to, if you put it under your tongue or you drop it in the water, alcohol can enter your system and enter into your bloodstream much faster. And this is one of the benefits of herbal tinctures in general, no matter what solvent you use, but it can enter your blood system faster without needing to be digested or absorbed by your gut and utilized by your metabolism. So alcohol tinctures are the fastest, most potent, most effective way to deliver a herbal remedy. And since it's so much more concentrated, you use the least amount of herbs possible. So glycerite, you can take it under your tongue and you can put it in the water, and it's going to be sweeter. And it's going to enter your system. It's not going to have to go through your digestive system either, just like pills and capsules do. That's why pills and capsules take so much longer, and a lot of them get wasted, because the herbal medicine has to go through this whole process before it enters your bloodstream. But a glycerin will still not be as concentrated and not be as strong, and it'll still be a little slower acting, and its preservation quantity and quality, it's going to preserve well. But an alcohol tincture can preserve for several years, like more than 5 years. And a glycerin tincture, you're going to have to utilize it within like 1.5 years to 3 years. So an alcohol tincture is, in some books and some studies, is 10 times longer. You can store an alcohol tincture 10 times longer than you can a glycerite, right? So that's what I want to tell you about glycerites. And then there are another type of solvent that I want to talk about today, and that's a vinegar. So vinegar is another excellent herbal extractor. The thing about vinegar, though, think about vinegar. think of vinegar as a food. So when you want to create like a nourishing tonic, a digestive tonic, you want to feed your body, you want to help feed your microbiome and your gut. Vinegar is a great option, especially if you're trying to avoid the alcohol for whatever reason. However, vinegar is like food, right? More so than medicine in the traditional word. So what I'm trying to say is vinegar will extract the vitamins and minerals better than alcohol will. Alcohol is going to extract the things like the astringent properties, the anti-inflammatory properties, the alkaloids, all these phytochemicals, all these things that chemists study in their books, right? And you read these books and you're like, what is that? And they have all these diagrams and interesting contraptions, right? But a vinegar is going to extract the vitamins and minerals, and it is going to store for a while when you compare it to a water-based extraction. But a vinegar is only going to last for about 6 months, right? So vinegars have a tendency to mold. They have a tendency to mold and go bad fairly quickly. So some people store their vinegars in refrigerators. Okay. Yeah. What else do I want to tell you about it? There are a couple more things that I want to say about glycerins and alcohol. There are a couple more benefits between when you compare alcohol tincture and a glycerin tincture that sometimes you don't really think about. One of them is from an herbal business perspective. Okay. I feel a little hesitancy, but I'm just going to be honest. So from my perspective, I'm coming from a perspective that I see that the vast majority of the advantages from an herbal medicine maker's that I want to utilize the least amount of herbs to make the strongest, most potent, with the most extraction out of the herb as possible. And I want to keep it for the most amount of time. Plus, I want to make it affordable. So for me, I can go right now and drive down the street and I can go buy alcohol to make my tincture. But in order for me to get glycerin, the quantities that I need to order that online, and it's more expensive. So the access to the glycerin is a little bit more and the price is a little bit higher. From an herbal medicine making perspective, as a business, when you have a hobby, then it turns into a business. That's very different, right? From a business, you're making medicine for other people. So you're solving their problems. They have a problem. They need to make more breast milk, so they come to you. They have a baby that's crying with colic, so they come to you. They have a baby that's restless and can't sleep. They come to you. They have their cough and they can't get rid of it, so they come to you, right? But they're not herbalists, right? They're a person with a problem that is looking for a solution. So they don't fully understand the full picture of herbal medicine. So when I give a pregnant woman a tincture and she sees it and she's like, oh my gosh, there's alcohol in here. Is that safe? How could you give me something with alcohol? You're a midwife. You should know better. And why would you put alcohol in this herbal tincture? And so I'm like, I smile because I'm like, okay, well, first of all, this is perfect. Let's talk about this. The word tincture means that it's alcohol extraction, and the amount of alcohol that's in the tincture is so minuscule. Just think about it. Let's pick an alcohol tincture. Oh, that's not alcohol tincture. I have a lot of glycerites for this very reason. Here's alcohol tincture. Just think about it. This tincture is made with 50% alcohol and 50% water. That means this is a 30 ml. This is 1 ounce. Half of this bottle is filled with alcohol and the other half is filled with water. So plus when you're going to take the tincture, you're going to open it up and draw it up into the dropper, you're going to take 20 to 40 drops of the tincture. This is going to last you 2 weeks or longer. So if you take 20 to 40 drops of this, knowing that this is only halfway full of alcohol, then you start to get a concept of like, oh, that's minuscule. That's negligible amount of alcohol. You're not going to be drunk from it. It's not going to affect your pregnancy. And it's compared to the amount of alcohol that's found in a vanilla extract. Or even when things turn like fruit and it starts to turn rancid and you can make wine out of it. Or so even a ripe banana, the one that's a little too ripe and you're like, well, I can make a banana bread out of that thing. That has more alcohol than this does, right? So when pregnant women are like, ooh, is this okay? Or when breastfeeding women are like, oh my gosh, I'm breastfeeding. How could you give me something with alcohol in it? That's ridiculous. And you're like, oh, let me explain. I'm mentioning pregnancy and breastfeeding, and I'm holding this tincture, so it makes me want to say something. From a midwife perspective, from an herbal perspective, the concern about alcohol, I'll get into more concerns why some people are concerned, but just the physiological, will it negatively affect my pregnancy or negatively contaminate my breast milk, and will it affect my baby? The amount of alcohol in this tincture will not negatively do that. However, I think the more important question to be asking is not, does this have alcohol in it? The more important question is this herb safe for me to take during pregnancy or during breastfeeding? And you cannot assume that the herb is safe for you in pregnancy and the same herb is safe for you in breastfeeding, or vice versa. Because this tincture that I'm holding, Let There Be Milk, is perfectly safe, and I recommend it to breastfeeding women to help them produce a bunch of breast milk. However, it is not recommended at all for pregnancy, right? But it's not because of the alcohol content in it, it's because of the herbs that are in it. The herbs are specific for breastfeeding and not for pregnancy. Okay, so I just wanted to clear that up because I get that question a lot. Another thing that I want to say just from a business perspective, two things. So you're making something for somebody else, right? And they don't know, right? And so they take an herb. People in the outside world, they want something to work. They paid for it. They bought it. They have a problem. They want a solution. At the same time, they want also everything to be sweet and perfect, right? Right? And so they don't want the pharmaceutical way anymore, which is odorless, tasteless, totally calculated, and without any art. They want to come now to the earth and get natural remedies, but then they take a tincture that has alcohol in it and they're like, whoa, oh my gosh, this is terrible. This tastes terrible. I don't think I can do it. I think this is too strong. I can't handle it, right? And you're like, okay, so let me teach you how to take a tincture. And I have a whole video about how to take a tincture, so I'm not going to go into that right now, but essentially you can just drop it in some water or put some water under your tongue and drop it under your tongue. I'm saying that to say that people don't understand, and they're immediately like, oh my gosh, this tastes strong and potent, but it tastes strong. They don't want it to taste strong, but yet they want it to be potent. That's the part that doesn't quite match. So, as an herbalist, as a person that's serving the community, I started to shift and make all these glycerines, because I do believe that glycerines are much easier to give to children. And I do agree wholeheartedly that with people that have really devout religious, spiritual beliefs and they don't want alcohol to enter into their temple, I get that and I respect that. I also totally, fully honor and validate the people that have a challenge with alcohol and other forms of substances, and they don't want the alcohol in their system because they don't want to go back to a way of life that they've worked so hard, right? And so there are some valid reasons, physically, spiritually, metaphysically, that alcohol is not the appropriate medicine for them. However, the vast majority of people that think that alcohol is a problem, it's really just they need more information, is all I'm trying to say. So we make a bunch of glycerites to appeal to people's palate so that it's sweet, and to appeal to people's to lessen their concern and lessen their fear and make it softer. One other piece about an herb business that I want to tell you is that when you sell herbs online and you have alcohol in your tinctures, then you have to store them in this thing called hazmat storage, and then versus a glycerin tincture. So when you ship, I can ship this tincture and I can ship this tincture to the storage facility. This tincture, I can put 100 of them in a box and ship it. Make sure I'm talking about the right one. 100 of them in a box and ship it, and it costs like $8 to ship it. I can put 100 of these in a box and ship it, and it costs me $50. And then the storage for this thing is like a few cents per cubic inch. The storage for this one is like 50 cents per cubic inch. So alcohol starts to become really expensive. So when you want to make the potent, the best, the strongest thing, you got to pay for that. So there's just a little thing. You probably didn't know that. It didn't even cross your mind. Okay, so I just want to share that with you. Another question that people ask me is, can you get drunk off a tincture? I feel like I just answered that. The amount is so negligible that no, you're not going to get drunk off a tincture. What else do people ask me? I talked about that. They want to know, okay, some people, I get this question a lot. Okay, so I want the potency of the alcohol tincture, but I don't want the alcohol in it. So how do I take the alcohol out? Okay, super simple. Don't worry. It's very easy to do. All you're going to have to do is get a cup of boiling water, or i.e., even better, a cup of herbal tea. So you're making your herbal tea, and you don't fill your cup up all the way, right? So you've got your herbs in there, you pour your boiling water, you let it steep, because then you want the medicinal properties of the herbs in there. All right? So then after you've let it steep for a minute, you left some space, you're going to pour some more boiling water into the cup. Now it's hot again. You're going to take your tincture. I should have one of these open. Oh, this is chlorophyll. You'll see it. Imagine this is a herbal tincture. Well, this is a herbal tincture. This happens to be really green. You have to use your imagination. This is hot boiling water. Steam is coming out of here, right? And so here's the important thing. You have to drop your recommended amount on top of the surface of the hot water. It's important that the alcohol tincture touches the surface of the boiling water, because the heat from the water is going to heat up the alcohol and it's going to help it evaporate. What you do not want to do are two things. You do not want to cover it, because once you cover it and let it steep, it's going to create condensation. So the alcohol is going to evaporate, and then it's going to condensate, and then it's going to enter back into your cup, and it's going to evaporate and condensate, and then you didn't get rid of the alcohol. So you have to have the cup open. The other thing, and I don't want to do this because I don't want to ruin my thing, but imagine that I took this dropper and I plunged it inside the liquid, right? I plunged it. I was distracted, and my dropper is now inside the liquid. And what happens then is that the drop of the tincture stays contained like as this molecule, and then the water is around it and it's like contained, and so this molecule can't open up and make it to the surface, so it can't evaporate. So the only way you're going to evaporate the alcohol out is by putting it on the surface. And once you let it sit for about 5 minutes, the vast majority of the alcohol is gone. Okay? All right. What else? Another question people ask me about tinctures is like, how long do tinctures keep? Do herbal tinctures go bad? What's the shelf life? And do herbal tinctures need to be refrigerated? Okay, so the short answer, and I kind of already said this, an alcohol tincture can keep for about 5 years. That's the industry standard. So as an herbal business, we have to put an expiration date on all of our supplements. So when you're making herbal supplements, if you are going to put anything into your mouth, there has to be an expiration date. If it's just on the surface of your body, like a salve or a cream or a bath, there doesn't have to be an expiration date on that. So an alcohol tincture, industry standard, 5 years. Now, I don't know about you, but I know about myself, and right in there, I have tinctures in my closet that are well over 5 years, and I know I'll still utilize those. And I've read in like countless herb books of herbalists that have taken tinctures off their shelves that are more than 10 years old, and they've taken to the lab, and they're still clean and effective and safe, and they're still adequate, good medicine. Okay, and then when you have a glycerite, it's going to be 14 months to 3 years, and when you have a vinegar, it's going to be about 6 months. Vinegars technically don't have to be refrigerated, but they Could be. They might consider refrigerating your vinegars. The rest of them do not need to be refrigerated. If you want to maintain the shelf life, it matters how you utilize the herb and how you store the herb. And another thing I want to say is, can tinctures go bad? That's one of the questions. And yes, tinctures can go bad because of how they're utilized and how they're stored. Let me explain. We have this program, this brand ambassador program, and sometimes our brand ambassadors take the most gorgeous pictures. They really do. And they put our products in these great scenes. And this one scene's coming to my mind. She posted it on Instagram. It was awesome. And she had it on this windowsill, and the light was coming through, and you could see all the cobalt blue and the color of the labels. And I was like, wow, that's a really gorgeous picture, right? And then my herbalist mind is like, wait a second. Don't store your herbs on a windowsill, even if they're cute, because if you want to maintain the shelf life, you have to put your herbs in a cool, dry, temperature maintained, dark place, like a cupboard or a closet or a chest or a box. Even if they're in dark bottles, like all of mine are in dark bottles, I still don't want to leave this sitting out in the light. Right? So there's that. The other thing is how it's utilized. Let's think that through. Okay, so an alcohol tincture is really phenomenal at its preserving qualities, right? It's not going to really, unless something wasn't sealed right or something dropped into the bottle, it's not going to allow for bacteria to grow, and it's not going to allow for mold to grow, right? However, a glycerite it's sweet, sugar sweet. It's not sealed right, it's not stored right. It's going to allow for potentially bacteria and mold, but also how you utilize it. So, if you have an herbal tincture that's a glycerite, let's do one that's for immune health. Okay, children's immune boost. So you have a glycerite, and you are like, oh, everybody's sick. Okay, here, open up, and you give some to your son, and then you give some to your daughter, and then you give some to your partner, and then you take some, and everybody's sick, and this could potentially harbor bacteria. Maybe you touched the mouth, maybe you didn't, but taking a glycerite and putting the dropper in people's mouths, that could potentially contaminate your tincture. Versus taking a dropper and dropping it in everybody's little cup and everybody taking some, that's going to prolong your shelf life and the efficacy and the potency of your tincture. Okay, the other place to not store your tinctures, I do this all the time, but I'm telling you not to do it. So do what I say, but not what I do. But no, seriously, don't store your tinctures in the car. Because in the car, it's hot summertime, and then it's freezing cold wintertime. But then I store them in the car, and you're like, why do you do that? Well, because that's the only time, or my best time, that I have my son sequestered in the car with me. And I'm like, hey, you want to go to soccer practice? Take some tinctures. I mean, Sequoia is the reason I've made all of these. Like when I couldn't breastfeed him, I started making Let There Be Milk, and then when he was crying baby, I made stomach soother somewhere over here, and then all of these children's herbs came from me trying to keep him healthy, right? So his whole life he's taken tinctures. And just the other day, like yesterday exactly, he wants to go to his friend's 16th birthday party. He's about to turn 16, and I'm like, there's COVID, it's pandemic, you better take your herbs. I'm not going to take my herbs, man. I'm like, yes you are. Get in there. And we're driving in the car, and I'm like yelling at him, trying to be peaceful. And he's like, oh. And then I see him, and he knows what to do, and he pulls out the Children's Daily Immune, 16-year-old, and he takes his dropper, and he knows to count them out to me. 1, 2, 3. And so I have to hear the number 3 before I accept that was a good enough amount. But so that your children don't have to be little kids to be taking these. They can be older. So that's the only reason I keep them in my car, is not because I think that it's the best place, but it's because it's the only place I can keep him in there and like force him to take it so he can go to a birthday party. When they're 3, it's easier. You can just be like, you want to watch a show? Take an herb. 16's harder. Okay. What else? What else do I want to say about herbal tinctures? That's what I want to say. I do want to say something about tinctures too. No matter how you're preserving them, the moment you take the plant, you harvest that plant, part of the medicinal properties start to fade, right? So when the solvents or the extraction process is going to help maintain and preserve the qualities. Depending on what solvent you use, the longer you're going to preserve it. Okay, what I want to say is, but eventually time will take its toll, and your tinctures will start to change. And so tinctures that have been sitting on the shelf for a really long time, it's pretty normal for them to get a little bit cloudy and to get a little bit of sediment on them in the water, in the liquid. The other thing that happens is that remember I talked about earlier about resins or aromatic plants? Part of what we're extracting out of the plants, part of the medicine, is contained in these resins. This resinous part of the plant is called volatile oils. It's the part that smells good, tastes good, improves our digestion, reduces our inflammation. It's the part that helps prevent infection. It's the part that works, right? And so those resins can kind of collect onto your dropper. And I might have an example just because this happens sometimes even when your tincture isn't expired, but especially when it is expired, you start to notice, you're like, oh, you open it up and you're like, is that mold or what's wrong? Why does this tincture look so different? And partially it's just because things separated out. And so when you make a tincture, remember you have the plants and then you separate the plants and then you press it out and you filter it out. And so when you first make it, it's really freshly filtered, but then as time goes and gravity goes, these sediments start to separate. And so what can happen, oh, see, perfect. This is not expired, but I knew to use this one because this is a very aromatic plant and it's made with glycerin. So glycerin is thicker than alcohol, so it's more likely to leave that ring. And this is a very aromatic, smelling good, tasting good remedy. So it's likely to leave, I don't know if you can see, but there's a resinous line on this dropper. So this is not mold. This is just showing you that you have a potent, active medicinal tincture, medicinal glycerite. So all you have to do is wipe that off, shake it up, and keep taking it. The thing is, you want to trust yourself to determine. How are you going to determine if the tincture has gone bad? You're going to utilize your senses, right? You're going to utilize your senses. You want to try to remember, like, so if you made the tincture or if you bought the tincture, what did it look like? What did it smell like? What did it taste like? What did it feel like when you first bought it? And now what does it look like, smell like, feel like, taste like now, right? And so trust your senses, your way of gaining information. And if your gut tells you it's off, then just don't utilize it. But the vast majority of time for an alcohol tincture, if it was stored properly, the worst thing that'll happen is that it's just not as potent anymore. It's just not going to be just as effective, and it's going to have some sediment in it. That's the vast majority of time. Okay? Now, like I said, the other ones when you open up a vinegar, you might see a black ring. That might really be mold. When you open up a tincture, that black ring might really be a resin ring, and so you're going to have to determine the differences. Okay? What else do I want to tell you? I want to talk to you a little bit about tincture dosages. This is really where the art comes in. Okay. In all my videos, I like to tell you the whole picture, and then I also kind of like to be conservative and err on the side of safety. So I'm doing that the same with when I'm talking about how long your shelf life is, but also when I'm talking about dosing yourself, an adult or a child, right? And so there's not a one size fits all answer. For example, partially the dose is determined depending on which plant you're working with. So for example, if I'm working with nourishing plants like, I don't know, nettle and dandelion, hawthorn, those are gentle, those are nourishing. And you can take several droppers several times a day, and that's totally fine. But then when you start working with more medicinal herbs like golden seal or even Echinacea augustifolia, you know, 10, 20, but 10 drops a few times a day is probably good. Because they're much lobelia, a few drops, right? And then cayenne is so potent, 1 drop might be enough, right? So there's not like, okay, herbal tincture, 20 to 40 drops. It's like, what are the herbs in the tincture? That determines how much. The next thing, in terms of adults, you're looking at the baseline. There's a structure, there's a framework, and you would say the general rule of thumb is if a person weighs 150 pounds, they get the recommended dose, and a standard industry standard dose is a full dropper. So in order to get a full dropper, you squeeze the plunger, then you release it, and see how I got half of the dropper? You turn it upside down, you let it go down into the cap, you squeeze it again, and then now see I have a full dropper? That's a full dropper. That is anywhere between 35 to 40 drops. I have to give you a range because not every drop is the exact same size. So generally speaking, a dropper is about 40 drops. A person who weighs 150 pounds takes 40 drops 1 to 5 times a day. Now, 1 to 5 times a day, that's really, what does that mean? That means based on the person, based on the situation, based on the condition, that's how they do it. So I'm rarely taking 5 times a day good night sleep tincture, right? Well, I'm not taking 5 times a day good night sleep tincture. But if I had a cold or a flu, I could be taking 5 times a day. Somewhere over here. I would be taking elderberry complex 5 times a day if I felt like I had a cold or flu or a fever, or my child was sick with a cough. I absolutely would do that. If I had to bring in my breast milk quickly, I would take that 5 times a day. But I wouldn't be taking chlorophyll. Where's my chlorophyll? I wouldn't be taking that 5 times a day. You'd be all like, so it's like it depends on your situation. What else do I want to say? So if you weigh 150 pounds, 1 dropper, 1 to 5 times a day. If you weigh less than 150 pounds and you're the type of person that you take something and you feel it instantly and everything is really strong for you and you're like, whoa, I am like sensitive and susceptible to all these herbs, they're really strong for me, then just cut the dose in half and go from there, right? Now, if you're over 150 pounds and you're like, I took a dose and I didn't even feel it, and I feel like I could go for more, then go for more. It's your body that tells you, right? I'm not much more than 150 pounds, but oftentimes I do 1 and 1.5, or sometimes 2 droppers, depends on my situation, right? Because I'm that hardcore. Anything. Okay, another thing about dosages is for children. So when you're talking to children, when you're thinking about children, you can give them alcohol tinctures. They're going to go, but they're going to do for a lot of different things too. So it's kind of like, well, does it really matter? However, it's much easier to give them glycerites, so that's why all of ours are glycerites. And there's a thing here, you're going to have to use your intuition. And what I mean by use your intuition, I don't mean guess. Well, I guess that I'll do this. So intuition isn't just this thing that like just comes to you on a whim. Actually, intuition is a cultivated skill that you've learned to rely on. Partially it comes from your education, and it comes from your experience. And so what I'm trying to say is, in the beginning I didn't guess. I read the book, right? I read the book, and then I read the super technical, complicated book full of words and terms I don't know how to pronounce. And then I read the super simple little leaflet book that you're like, I could have wrote that. And then you read the book that like speaks to your soul. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna do this one. This is me, right? So you need a couple of good herb books, right? That variety of herb books, and then you start to see like how many different approaches there are to herbal medicine, and how there's so many similarities, even if they're using different language. And then how people have different approaches to their dosing. Some people do little tiny micro dosing, and other people use massive amounts of herbs, right? And so you're going to find what works best for you. It's going to start from reading, and then it's going to start from you putting the herbs in your body, and then it's going to continue from you trying the herbs on your children. That's how intuition is cultivated, right? It's a skill. So you have to utilize your skills and your intuition, and then you start to give your herbs to your kids. There is a standard dose, and this video has a companion to it. There's a blog post, and I wrote this blog post, and in the blog post I have a chart for you. It's a dosage chart for herbal tinctures for children, and you can have that chart. The link is in the description. General rule of thumb: if it is a baby that's over 6 months old, you can give the baby 1 drop of herbs per 5 pounds of body weight. Okay, so for example, if this baby weighs 18 pounds, you're like, okay, 18 pounds, you could give that baby 3 or 4 drops of the tincture, right? And that would be your starting place. Now, some people ask me this question. A woman asked me this question, and I was like, that's a great question. I have to figure it out. She's like, okay, so how many milligrams are in a drop of Children's Immune Boost? How many milligrams am I giving my baby? And I'm like, that's a great question. I have to figure it out. So here's your answer. Okay, so when you look at all of our tinctures, you will see that it'll say the milligrams per milliliter. So that means this one says, I think it says 373, right? So since this one is not open, I'm going to open this. I'm going to say this. For this tincture that you're going to give to your child, a dropper, let me say it like this. This bottle contains 30 mils. That means it has 30 droppers. Each dropper has 373 milligrams. So each dropper contains approximately 35 to 40 drops. We're going to say 40. Each dropper contains 40 drops. So you take 373 and you divide it by 40, and that is 9.4 milligrams. So that baby that's 6 months old that got the 4 drops of tincture, that child got 38 milligrams of herbs per dose, right? I know it's a little calculated, but somebody asked me that question, and I thought that was a good question. So all you do, take the dropper, divide it by the milligrams, figure out how many drops you're giving them, and then that's your milligrammage dose. It's all written for you in the blog post. And when you're working with children and you want to know more about children, I wrote a book called Herbs for Kids. It's an ebook. and it's free, and there's an online course that you can have, and the link is in the description. Okay. What else do I want to tell you? Oh, another thing that comes up in questions that I get from parents, particularly, there are lots of food sensitivities, which is one thing, but then there are allergies where children are very allergic to things, right? And you're concerned about allergies, but you want to give them the herbal remedies, but you're not sure what to do. So you want to do an allergy test on the baby. The easiest way that you could do that is you would take the dropper. I'm just going to put it on my finger. Take this drop, take a few drops, and rub it on the inside of their arm on a really sensitive place, right? And then, if you're really concerned about allergies, like you're really talking about like EpiPen allergies, then you'll be willing to wait. So you'll wait 24 hours. If you see that area get red, if you see their eyes get red or itchy throat or anything like that, then you're like, whoa, do not give that baby this medicine internally. But if you don't see a red thing, you don't see anything red, everything seems fine, then you still proceed with caution and you give them half the recommended amount. And then you wait 24 hours or 12 hours. And if you still don't see any concern, then you can proceed with the recommended amount. Okay, so I wanted to share that with you too, because that was a question that came up. There's probably so much more I could say, but we're going to call it right here. But I am curious. I have a couple questions for you in the comments. Have you made tinctures? Have you made glycerites and vinegars? Or how long? So if you've made tinctures, let us know what the challenge is. And if you have tinctures on your shelf and in your closet and your herb cupboard, how old are some of these oldest tinctures that you have and that you're still taking them? Did you ever have a tincture go bad? What came up for you? What did you notice? And what challenges do you have when you're giving tinctures to children? Go ahead and put those in the comments. And I really want you to know that, man, tinctures are an amazing, effective medicine that can travel with you wherever you go. They are potent and accessible and affordable. They're really where it's at, actually. I'm pretty pro tincture. I wrote a whole blog post about everything you need to know about tinctures, and it has a chart in it about the solvents, the best solvents to utilize when you're trying to extract certain properties out of the plants. And then also in the post there is the dosing chart for children. And I would also like you to know that, since you've listened this far, that you can utilize the code Tinctures, and when you go to our website to read the blog, you can utilize the code Tinctures and you can get 10% off any tincture that you see here. So that's pretty cool. And I would also like you to push like and subscribe on the videos and share it with your friends, because it's really important. And until next time, my friends, drink deep and always walk in beauty.